Hello, good evening, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to all of you, wherever you are joining us from. Welcome to the 2025 Global Hunger Index launch. My name is Christine Mundwa. It is my great pleasure to once again be steering us through this very important event. A very special thank you and a very warm welcome to you wherever you're joining us from. And in fact, that brings me to my next point. We are all very curious to know who is with us and where they're joining us from today. And so we've got a poll coming up onto your screen. If you would kindly take part in that by telling us where you're joining us from. As you are getting ready to do that, I'll make the case that you are hearing me in English, but if you prefer translation in French or perhaps even in German, we have made that available for you. So at the bottom of your screen is an icon where you're able to select your language of choice between, of course, French and German. For those of you comfortable hearing this in English, you can stay right where you are. So once again, thank you for joining us, wherever you're joining us from. And if you might be experiencing any technical difficulty, please make use of the chat forum. We have a tech support monitoring that chat, and any challenges you might be having, please indicate in our chat forum. So I'm seeing some of you are already writing in the chat where you're joining from. Please also be clear that there's going to be something coming up on your screen where you can select the region of the world that you're in. And in a moment, I'll be sharing those results with everybody who is joining. Please know that, as is per our tradition here at the GHI launch, we are recording our program today, and at a later date, it will be available on Welthungerhilfe's YouTube page. So there will be another opportunity to listen back to our conversation for today. As is per the norm on these platforms, please keep your microphones muted at all times. You're happy to turn your camera on, please go ahead and do that. But please just make sure that your microphones are muted at all times so that we don't disturb the discussion as it is happening. But muted mics don't mean that we don't want your ideas. I certainly would like to get your questions, which I will be conveying to our speakers who will be taking part in the panel discussion. So please, post your questions, ideally with the speaker or panelists that you would like to direct them to in the Q&A. So tech support is in the chat, but the questions will go in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Those will come directly to me here in the studio, and I will make sure to bring them into the conversation so that our panelists can tackle those today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with that being done as our housekeeping, why don't we just take a moment to step back. 20 years of tracking progress. This is, ladies and gentlemen, the 20th anniversary of the Global Hunger Index. And I believe that there are some in the audience who might be here that have been here from the very beginning, who've been tracking this report, following this report from the very beginning. It'll be interesting to hear your thoughts as we mark this anniversary of 20 years of this report that gives us great insight as to what we as a global community must continue to do to achieve our sustainable development goals. Indeed, we are only 5 years away from 2030, ladies and gentlemen, just 5 years away. And we'll get a sense today of how far away we are from achieving zero hunger. Because as you will hear later when we break down the report, it's painting a sobering picture. Ladies and gentlemen, you turn on the news today and you hear of widespread conflict, climate change, economic crises, and pick a region, and you will be able to relate with that. These continue to deepen hunger, and they continue to exacerbate inequalities. And we're seeing that in societies all over the world, ladies and gentlemen. So isn't there a better time to look at the right to food and how it is blatantly being disregarded the world over, violating the rights of millions of people on a daily basis? And so rightly so, today's event, ladies and gentlemen, is about recommitting to what we set out to do, to zero hunger, recommitting to zero hunger. So I talked about the report, the 2025 report, and the insights that it is giving us. And I have little to say about that because we have a designated person who I'm going to invite now to the stage. Matthias Moga is the General Secretary, or Secretary General, as well as the Chief Executive Officer of Welthungerhilfe, and he is going to break down the report for us in a short moment. But before he comes up, Matthias, I want to get back to our poll and get a sense of where everybody is joining us from. So if I can ask our colleagues in the tech support to open that up for us. Okay, so we can see that the bulk of our audience is right here in Europe, but I'm pleased about the fact that we have representation from every region in the world. I see Sub-Saharan Africa, that's home for me, North America, Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as Asia and the Pacific. We've got other regions as well. A very warm welcome to you wherever you're joining us from. There was a second question that I didn't prompt you, but I see you've gone in and looked at that. And what do you most want to hear today? And Matthias is standing close by and he is hearing that, and so are the panelists who will be taking part in the discussion. So I see that there is great interest in, well, I guess equal interest, if you can call it that, in the stories of our progress. You will be hearing that in our panel discussions. The challenges being explained, a reality check, a strong sense or a strong dose of reality will be coming through also in our panel discussion. Bold new ideas, and that is a challenge to my panelists who will be joining us later, as well as policy insights. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't feel that coming through in our discussion, give us those pointed questions that I can pose to our speakers as we get into the discussion. But to give us that setting of the scene of what this report is telling us this year, I will now invite Matthias Moga to take us through just the highlights and an executive summary of the Global Hunger Index report. So Matthias, it is now over to you.
Thank you very much, Christine, and ladies and gentlemen, hello, good afternoon. I'm very pleased, very happy to be with you here, and also from my side, a warm welcome on behalf of WHH Welthungerhilfe, but also on behalf of Concern Worldwide and the Institute for International Law of Peace and Armed Conflict, who are also the co-authors of this report. And also a warm welcome to our panelists, our experts, who also figure in this year's report very prominently. Thank you very much. So since 2006, the Global Hunger Index has tracked the state of hunger worldwide by region and by country to spotlight where action to address hunger is most urgently needed. This year marks the 20th edition of the GHI. It comes at a moment of rising alarm about food security globally and in certain hotspots. Hunger is increasingly driven by overlapping and accelerating crises like armed conflicts or climate shocks, economic fragility and political disengagement. Conflict remains the most destructive force driving hunger, though. In Sudan, the site of one of the world's most severe humanitarian crises, famine was detected in several locations in 2024 and has threatened it to spread since, while half the country's population, around 25 million people, were projected to face acute food insecurity between December 2024 and May 2025. In Gaza, we all know today is a very special day for Gaza, and we really hope that these first steps will turn into a kind of long-lasting peace for Gaza, for the whole region. But in Gaza, still, the humanitarian situation remains catastrophic and conditions are still deteriorating. The entire population is experiencing crisis level or above. Around 641,000 people, roughly 1/3 of the population, are living in famine-like conditions. The number of people dying daily as a result of malnutrition reflects the fact that they are denied access to basic services and necessary humanitarian assistance. Conflicts in Myanmar, Nigeria, South Sudan are fueling additional food crises. At the same time, development finances are under extreme stress, and the humanitarian sector is struggling to respond adequately to rising needs. These circumstances are reflected in the 2025 GHI scores. So let me go to the next slide. I hope you can see the slides. Yes, so this is the second slide. I would like to tell you how we measure this GHI, and I guess most of you are with us since quite some time and you have seen that before. So I will go through it pretty quickly. First of all, it is important really to understand how do we measure this GHI score to reflect the complexity of hunger. The index combines 4 indicators to assess the availability of calories, but as well quality and the utilization of food. To share the share of population that is undernourished, those with insufficient caloric intake is measured by undernourishment here. The child stunting rate stands for the children who are too short for their age, reflecting chronic undernutrition. Child wasting is a low weight for height. So the children are too light for their height, reflecting acute undernutrition. And last but not least, we are measuring the child mortality, the most tragic consequence of hunger and undernutrition. This calculation then results in scores on a 100-point scales that reflect the severity of hunger from low to extremely alarming, where 0 is best, no one is hungry in a country, and 100 is worst, everyone would be hungry. Each country's score is categorized and ranked according to the severity of the hunger situation. We only use officially published data from several UN organizations like UNICEF in particular, but also others, and other multilateral organizations. That means the data in the GHI is not today's data, it's not from today, but the most recently published and available data. So what are the GHI score trends? Yes, you see it. We see overall that after a period of notable gains up to the year 2016, and this you can clearly see that here on the graph, the World Global Hunger Index score has barely shifted, remains more or less at the same level, with the global score remaining in the moderate category at 18.3 in 2025. This is only slightly down from 19 in 2016. Underlying this moderate score is a reality that for billions of people, the right to food is out of reach. Across the globe, 673 million people do not have enough to eat. So this is the overall picture. In 42 countries, hunger remains either serious or alarming, with most of them clustered in Africa, south of the Sahara, and South Asia. So what are the trends? In 27 countries with moderate, serious, or alarming 2025 GHI scores, hunger has increased since 2016. If progress remains at the pace observed since 2016, at least 56 countries will not reach low hunger by 2030. Let me check whether there is a slide coming. It's coming. So which are the countries with the highest scores? 5 countries have levels of hunger considered alarming, indicating widespread human misery, undernourishment, and malnutrition. Haiti, Madagascar, Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, and Somalia are the countries with the highest 2025 GHI scores. Burundi and Yemen are also provisionally classified as alarming because we don't have a full set of data for these countries. Data gaps are a general problem as they are obscuring the true extent of hunger. For some countries, data are really missing completely or partly because of conflict, political unrest. For others, it's because systems to measure and respond to hunger are dismantled or weakened globally. It's also often because of a lack of funding. USAID was one of an important funders of these surveys, which have been carried out regularly. This resource is gone. It is likely that with complete data, for example, Burundi and Yemen would fall into the extremely alarming category. Still, yeah, it's coming. Looking at the regional scores, we see that Africa south of the Sahara and South Asia have made progress since 2000, with hunger moving from alarming to serious. In Africa, south of the Sahara, 35 of the region's 47 countries have moved to a lower GHI category since 2000, and Cabo Verde has become the first to reach low hunger. Since 2016, progress has slowed sharply, and hunger has risen in 10 countries. The region still records the world's highest undernourishment and child mortality rates. El Niño in 2024, the strongest in decades, brought drought to southern Africa, crop failures, and power cuts, for example, in Zambia and Zimbabwe, while heavy rains and floods displaced millions in West and Central Africa. South Asia, child wasting and stunting have declined, but remains the world's highest, driven by poor maternal nutrition, low birth weight rates, and unequal access to health services. West Asia and North Africa, hunger remains moderate but shows worrying reversal trends linked to conflict, economic crisis, and climate stress. The situation is most extreme in Gaza and Yemen. Hunger is low in Latin America and the Caribbean, East and Southeast Asia, and Europe and Central Asia. Though national disparities persist, hunger is alarming in Haiti and serious in North Korea, according at least to our estimates, because data also in North Korea are lacking. Looking at child stunting still remains very high in many countries. It's important to look at this individual indicator to get a better idea, to get a better picture of the hunger situation in each country, and to understand where the biggest challenges are. Child stunting, as I said before, is the chronic undernutrition, a lack of essential nutrients, which starts actually at the inception moment and is a severe problem in 24 countries, and the number have even increased in some contexts. The percentage of children under 5 with child stunting is highest in Burundi, with 55% of children living in Burundi are stunted, which is up slightly from 54% in 2016. In 2024, recurrent rainfall shocks, high transport costs, disease outbreaks, mpox, cholera, measles, left 2 million people in severe food insecurity, declining to 1.2 million by early 2025 due to better harvests. This was too fast maybe. Yeah, the individual GHI scores and where they are highest. So looking at child wasting, which is the acute undernutrition of children under 5, is highest in South Sudan, to the left. Between April and July 2025, 7.7 million people faced crisis-level food insecurity or worse. 80,000 faced famine conditions. Violence, floods, refugee inflows from Sudan continue to strain markets and humanitarian operations. Undernourishment, this is the graph in the middle, highest in Haiti, 54%, affecting over half of the population. Half of the population in Haiti have not enough to eat. Caused by armed violence, economic collapse, climate shocks, heavy cereal import dependence, 6 years of economic contraction, and suspended aid programs in early 2025 worsened even the crisis. Looking at child mortality at the very right, which is highest in Niger with 11.5%. And also here, the 2024 El Nino brought severe floods, infrastructure damage across West and Central Africa, with Niger among the hardest hits. Coming to an end, course correction is possible. Although overall progress in reducing hunger has largely stalled, as I said, since 2016, there have been also positive developments. Most notably, progress has been made in Mozambique, Uganda, Togo, Somalia, and also Rwanda. Generally, we would like to highlight course correction is possible, as we see in this graph that we showed before from 2016, global hunger has declined significantly, even amid recession and crisis, showing that coordinated action works. These gains stem from sustained investment and political will and leadership. Those levers are still within reach today. We'll dive deeper into what is needed to reach zero hunger in the following panel discussion. Last slide with some policy recommendations before the panel comes. We call on government to act now and decisively. Leave no one behind, the motto of the Agenda 2030. Act urgently on hunger and build resilient food systems. Second, strengthen national level political commitment and prioritize localized implementation. And third, break the cycle of conflict and hunger. With that, let's turn from findings to forward-looking action. I'm looking forward to our panel of leading experts and policymakers to discuss how we can engage, how we can change the trajectory from stagnation to reducing hunger. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for participating in our launch today. And with this, I hand over to Christine.
Thank you for that, Matthias. And I think that's provided us the picture that we need as we get into our conversation now. And I hope you can see there, Matthias, there is appreciation for your delivery of the results of the Global Hunger Index 2025, for that clarity and eloquence with which you have brought us. What is, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure we can make our own assessments, that sobering account. Indeed, just to reiterate your call to action, let's leave no one behind. So just picking up there from Matthias, we can see that the results this year of the GHI are reminding us of what is a sobering truth, that the world is moving further away from zero hunger by the year 2030, which is now just 5 years away. And it's not for a lack of warning signs, those have been there, but rather because of a collective failure to act. And so today's discussion is about changing that trajectory. We're saying that we want to recommit on this occasion of the 20th anniversary of this report. And so to that effect, as Matthias was saying, we're going to be hearing from diverse voices on peace, on governance, community leadership, as well as from research. We'll get a sense of what is working, where we're falling short, as well as importantly, how we can scale real solutions to overcoming hunger. As I mentioned earlier, I would love to have your questions coming into this discussion. So please make sure to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to relay questions that will come to me, and I will present those to our speakers today. But I now want to present you our panelists for the moment, and you'll be seeing them as they come up in no particular order. But I'll begin with Dr. Bimbala Ray Pojao, who is from the National Assembly, a member of the National Assembly in the Federal Parliament of Nepal. She's also a former Minister of Foreign Affairs there. MacDonald Metzger, Deputy Chief of Staff, or the focal person for the Sun Secretariat in the Office of the Vice President in Liberia. Dr. Wendy Geza, who is a familiar face to us here from the Food Systems and Policy Research at the University of KwaZulu-Natal's Center for Transformative Agricultural and Food Systems in South Africa. Dan Smith is former director of the Stockholm International Peace and Research Institute, otherwise known as SIPRI, out in Sweden. I'm very happy to see all of you, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. I know you were there when we asked our audience about what it is that they would like to take away from this discussion. So people are looking for our reflections. People want our strong ideas as it pertains to how we can achieve the goals that we've set out to achieve, my fellow speakers. So I know that you will be delivering in this regard. But I'd like to begin our conversation by asking you each a question that I would like for you to just answer briefly to get our conversation going. We have just heard that we're off of our trajectory. We're off track to reaching zero hunger. From the perspectives that you are all coming from, why don't you just tell us why you think that is? And I will begin with you, Dr. Pojao. If you could please unmute.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm very honored and privileged to join you all today. Regarding the factors of why we are lagging behind, I think the earlier presentation had sufficiently highlighted the conflict and fragility, especially the armed conflict and displacement caused by the conflict has disrupted the food systems in many regions. Similarly, climate change has a devastating effect, especially in crop and livestock productivity, affecting whole food systems and food chain. Climate shocks hit the smallholders with a severe livelihood and production effect, and smallholders cannot buy the food due to the rising prices, and these are some of the external factors that we are going through. There are demand side factors as well. But I just wanted to highlight two important points here. One is related to economic inequality and rising food prices. That is making poor people very difficult to gain access to food. Similarly, there is a changing food habits, especially only the lack of access and affordability. As we say, they remain the issue for poor, but even non-poor nowadays are experiencing malnutrition, and that is basically related to changing food habits. So there is a lot of interventions required because nutritious local foods are often being ignored or undervalued nowadays. Gender and exclusion related barriers still exist, and I just wanted to highlight shortly the points related to institutions and interventions to tackle with all these challenges. The institutions and interventions that we are following up are often projectized, and they work in silos in many cases. So we need to focus also in terms of what we are doing and what institutions are doing to address these external and internal factors. Basically, the hunger are multi-dimensional, and therefore it requires multi-stakeholder approach. It cannot be a sectoral approach. And now we can see that in many cases, the institutions lack a coordination and coherence across the sectors and across the labels. And that is one of the reasons why the interventions are also not being very effective as we want. Similarly, the food security issue, the addressing hunger, it requires a campaign. It's a movement. It's a campaign. It cannot be a projectized approach to deal with the size of level of issue that we are dealing with. So these are some of the factors that are related to policies, that are related to external factors, and that are related to institutions and interventions, which are showing us that we may lag behind in terms of meeting the Zero Hunger Index. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Your perspective there in Nepal, Dr. Paudel. McDonald Metzger, the same question to you. Why are we off track as it pertains to reaching zero hunger?
Thank you very much, Christine. I bring you greetings from the government and people of Liberia, and from the Vice President, who is the Chief Convener of the Multi-Sectoral High-Level Steering Committee on Nutrition and Food Security in Liberia. I think we are off track because hunger is not just a food problem. It is a symptom of multiple interlocking system failures, weak institutions, chronic underinvestment in rural infrastructure and human capacity, inequality in access to resources, and an inability to scale promising pilots into national systems. Added to that is as Bimala said earlier, the climate issue, the accelerating climate shocks, conflicts that are affecting agriculture. We talked about Sudan, Nigeria, Myanmar, Ukraine, and economic fragility. When you combine all of these problems, you get a recipe for regression rather than steady progress. In short, the constraints are structural, institutional, and political, not just technical. We have not yet adapted our approach to the realities in our respective regions, in our respective countries. In Liberia, what we have done, we have put agriculture at the center of our national development agenda. Agriculture is in the government's arrest agenda for inclusive development. Arrest, the A stands for agriculture. We are looking inwards to growing our own food instead of relying on imported food. We are partnering with private agencies, community organizations for people to grow their own food.
Thanks very much, McDonald. I'm interrupting you there because I don't want you to get into that just yet, because there will be designated time for that. But thank you for that scene setter of how you see, or rather where the failures are in terms of the reason why we're off track to reaching zero hunger. Dr. Geza, I'll come to you in KwaZulu-Natal, I believe it is, in South Africa. Your perspective then on why we're off track as it pertains to SDG 2.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for having me to be part of this conversation today. I think in terms of my perspective, a lot of the previous speakers have also highlighted things that I think could be off track. For example, it's been highlighted that we are lacking harmonized efforts, particularly retaining to the sectors that tackle systemic issues that are linked to hunger and malnutrition. For example, they've also mentioned that if you look at agriculture, it's connected to other sectors such as health, water, energy, and also looking at the productivity of the economy as a whole. So what this means is that when we tackle hunger, we must think about the interlinkages and the connectivities between these sectors so that we're not just addressing one singular element at a time. And if you also look at the different areas and sub-regions that have been highlighted that have had stagnating progress with hunger since 2016, you'd see that a lot of them are in areas that are heavily affected by climate change impacts and a lot of other disasters. And a lot of those regions also rely on agriculture for work and employment. So when we tackle hunger, it means that we also need to look at how hunger is also interconnected to those other factors so that when we tailor make a response, we are addressing multiple issues at the same time. And one other important thing that's also been mentioned that's also been mentioned that I also echo is the importance of sustained political will. As much as our governments go through different changes, the structures change, the faces of governments change, it's very important that the political will, budget, and also the commitment to these issues is sustained throughout. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Geza. And Dan Smith, to you the same question. Why are we off track to reaching zero hunger? So you're not able to communicate?
Oh, now it's happened, I think.
We can hear
me
you,
now?
yes.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what was happening with my screen there. One of those awful technical hitches that haunts meetings like this. Everybody has so far has been saying some very important things, and I particularly, from my own background, align myself with thinking about the role of climate change, the role of conflict, and indeed the lack of capacity to deal with the connections between issues, which Wendy Geza just brought up. But I think there's one other factor that one has to put in here, and that is that over the past decade, a little bit longer than that, but especially over the past decade, geopolitics has become completely toxic. And the international institutions, the global institutions that we have relied upon to handle issues like hunger, climate change, conflict, human rights, they have been weakening before our eyes. And that has accelerated since 2022 with the reinvasion of Ukraine by Russia, and accelerated again this year with the impact of the arrival in the White House for his second administration of Donald Trump. So I think it's that geopolitical level means that the global institutions are not able to handle the questions that my fellow panelists have been raising. If conflict, I mean, the last proper peace agreement was agreed in 2016, was in Colombia. If, in a sense, if conflict is out of hand, if climate change is out of hand, why would we not expect food insecurity to be in trouble as well? So it's that geopolitical level that I would add to everything else that is so important that the others have said.
Well, keep your mic on, Dan Smith, because as we were hearing from Matthias in the presentation, conflict, of course, remains the most destructive driving force, or force driving hunger, so to say. What makes today's conflicts so devastating for food security?
Well, I think that there are two things that I would highlight. One could choose a lot, because there's multiple connections between conflict and those kinds of insecurity and the insecurity of the food system. But let me focus just on two. One is the scale of some of these conflicts. I mean, the number of people who are being killed in warfare doubled in the second decade of this century compared to the first. So the total from 2010 to 2020 of war deaths was twice what it was from 2000 to 2010. Already by 2025, already by this year, we match the total of 2010 to 2020. So wars are getting bigger, they're getting worse. Look at Ukraine, look at Gaza, look at Sudan, Myanmar. I mean, in Democratic Republic of Congo, the number of people who have been displaced. Look at the way that a different kind of warfare, gang warfare essentially, in Haiti, has destroyed much of the state's capacity and is associated with a massive increase in hunger and in humanitarian issues in general in Haiti. So that's one part of it, is simply the scale of the conflicts at the moment. And whereas 15 years ago, there were 30 armed conflicts, today there are over 60 involving states. So the problem has just gotten worse. The scale of each conflict, the scale of the problem as a whole. The second thing is that in too many conflicts, what we see today is that the people are the target.
Yeah.
Destruction of people, of their homes, of their lives, of their livelihoods, of their agriculture, of their cities, is not just a unavoidable consequence of the tragedy of war. It is, for one party or another, sometimes both, it's the point of the war. And in those circumstances, of course, there are going to be massive food insecurity problems that follow on from that. To the point, of course, where what we have seen is starvation being used as a weapon of war. And that is really, I mean, there are no words to describe the depths of that kind of tactic, the depths of lack of morality of that kind of tactic.
Right, Dad. And I guess you've also spent a lot of time writing on this, call it this two-way relationship between conflict and hunger. Why don't you just give us maybe one concrete example of how we can break this vicious cycle?
Well, I'll be very quick with two. One is at the state level. What we have seen, for example, in Algeria, Morocco, and Egypt is after the food price crisis, the food price volatility of 2007, 2008. We've seen food system strategies by those governments which are explicitly designed to, by increasing food security, to increase social resilience. And in addition to that, you see at community level in numerous places, you could take some examples in some of the worst contexts, like in South Sudan and Jonglei, or in Mali, in areas there, but also some in the context of peace building, like on the border between Venezuela and Colombia, where you see community level and, if at all possible, community-led cooperation on rebuilding the food system and on getting a more resilient food system that doesn't rely so much on imports from outside. And that cooperation, together with that autonomy and that resilience, begins to build into much more peaceful relations. And you get this kind of then, what's often called the double bottom line. You win on both fronts. You get more peace and you get better nourishment.
Thanks very much for that for the moment. Dr. Wendegeza, I'll come to you now at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. You've researched food and environment policies in South Africa, in Tanzania, in Malaysia, in Ghana. You found that while the policies have been well sort of crafted, they're even regularly updated, they're not being properly implemented. What are the obstacles there? And then a word on how those obstacles can be solved.
Thanks, Christine. I think I highlighted a little bit of this in the beginning of my previous question. What I'm seeing from my research and what's currently emerging as the key challenge is that we lack a lot of multi-sectoral investments. And in cases where departments or different government ministries are seeing the impact of siloed approaches, they are then unable to actually translate that into action. So there's this saying that says what's not being measured is not being done. So the problem then becomes that we are talking about working together, but we don't have platforms that are now promoting us to work and plan together, which means that we don't have shared budgets to address issues that cut across sectors. So the Department of Education will be focused on just issues related to education. Health will do its own thing. Agriculture does its own thing. So it means that they're not thinking about the importance of education when it comes to nutrition. They're not thinking about the importance of productivity when it comes to learning and learning outcomes. And they're also not thinking about what the impact of the Department of Water and Sanitation will have on the overall food and nutrition security. So there's a lot of there's a lot of issues regarding the lack of multi-sectoral investments, and where they are, it's not very clear. So where there's lack of clarity means that we won't be able to account, we won't be able to monitor, we won't be able to evaluate, and we won't be able to allocate budgets. So that's what I think needs to be done. We need to plan together, but make commitments in terms of how we're going to execute the things that we plan together, so that when it's time for us to account, then we'll be able to follow through in terms of where the issues were and how do we do better moving forward. Those are just the key things that are coming out. And a lot of the impact of that then becomes that because departments are working differently, they're solving issues from a singular perspective. So they're missing a lot of leverage points that they could have used. They're duplicating things that they could have combined. And they're also addressing a lot of symptoms, and they're not looking at the systemic issues that are causing the situation to be what it is. So we need to work together, think about how things are connected, commit, because at the end of the day, we're all solving the same problem, but from different perspectives. Thank you.
Right. So on that point, Dr. Gezal, stay with me because you're making the strong emphasis about the need for collaboration, for partnership to avoid this duplication that you're making reference to. Could you paint a picture for us then? What do these platforms look like where there is this collaboration and partnerships in terms of successfully implementing food and nutrition policies?
Okay, I'll make an example with the current work that I'm involved in. So at the research team that I'm a part of in my university is currently assisting the Department of Agriculture in updating South Africa's food and nutrition policies. So what happens is that when we do meet with them, you are seeing a lot of representation from different stakeholders. So you are seeing academia, you're seeing the private sector, you're seeing civil society organizations, you're seeing organizations that are representing different types of faiths, and you're also seeing organizations that are representing young people. So when we have these conversations and when we are thinking of targets for the next 5 years for the upcoming food and nutrition security, we're thinking about how these different issues are affecting everyone that's in the room, so we can find a way to ensure that our solutions are addressing issues that are of importance of all of us. So what it looks like, it means that we are together in planning and we're also together in implementing. And in our collaboration, we're ensuring that it's very inclusive and it's representing everybody who is affected by the same problem. So in a sense, we're not only investing in solving a problem, but we're also ensuring that we're promoting a lot of agency and making sure that people at a community level are being empowered to solve their own problems. We're not looking at the problem from a government perspective, but we're having everyone being represented in the room so that they can articulate to us how the challenges are affecting them. And if we had to come up with solutions, what would be most important for them? So I think in all cases, whether it's through committees, advisory committees, or whether you're having sort of discussions, it's very important to have everyone represented because different things are important at different levels for everyone. So that's what it looks like in practice. I hope that answers your question.
It does. And any follow-ups, I'm sure you can make when you take some questions from the audience. But I will now go over to you, Dr. Paudel, because in Nepal, the right to food has actually been enshrined. And I wonder what has been the impact of that, and perhaps then what gaps remain, if you could share that with us. And just a reminder to unmute again.
Yeah. Thank you again. Nepal's constitution has enshrined the right to food and food sovereignty in constitution. And access to food is considered as a fundamental human rights now. The constitutional provision is again followed by development of right to food and food sovereignty, which is very Food Sovereignty Act. That has translated the vision of constitution into law. So it has, allowed people to claim their right to food in various forums, including to the government. The major impact has been in the shift in thinking and shift in priority. It's at least among the policymakers, it is now, being thought and at least being realized that food is not a charity issue. This is a right that people can claim. And this is the significant impact that we have observed because of the constitutional provision. Over the past decade, because it's a 10-year that we have a constitution now that has inherent food right. So over the past decade, we have seen that the constitutional commitments have begun to reshape the food landscape now. Especially what we can see is there is encouraged integration of food and nutrition security in local government's plan and in the federal government's plan. So you can see at least the food has become a priority in all level government's plan, along with the federalism that we have adopted. Similarly, we can see that there is a strengthened policy coherence across the agriculture, nutrition, social protection related grants and other initiatives that allow people to access to food. It has also enabled targeted programs. Basically, we can see the school meal program that has been introduced after the constitutional provision. We can see child and maternal nutrition support program. We can see the livelihood schemes for food insecure groups. So these are some of the targeted interventions that have been introduced just to fulfill this constitutional commitment. Similarly, we can see the contribution to gradual improvement to food availability and access. In many cases, we have community level initiatives like saving and credit initiatives are there. We have community forestry, we have cooperative farming. Even these community level initiatives have started identifying food as one of the important business. So these are some of the impacts that we can see from the constitutional provisions related to food. But there are a lot of gaps and challenges that we can still see, because the implementation of the laws, especially in laws, we have several elements. So implementation of these elements is still weak, and still there exists a lot of gap between what is there in the act and what is being implemented in ground. There are some progress, but there is also a gap. There is limited public awareness to right to food as a legal entitlement. Still, people are not being able to claim their rights. Still, it is considered as a charity issue. So there is a lot of room to increase the awareness from this rights-based perspective. Similarly, the Right to Food and Food Sovereignty Act is not fully enforced, and that's why there is a weak monitoring, grievance, and accountability mechanisms related to access to food. Climate shocks has resulted severe effect. This has threatened local food systems and rural livelihoods. So even the constitution guarantees we are not being able to produce more and then distribute accordingly. There is persistent inequality in land ownership. There are gender and social inequity issues. And there are gender norms, gendered values, which are affecting especially women's access to food in their critical time. For example, we have gendered norms that restrict women's access to food, especially during pregnancy, during the lactating period. So these are still there. So a lot of social engineering works still needed to fulfill the constitutional commitment. The more importantly, what I see is still the lack of political will, because we know that the food, agriculture production and distribution is prioritized in all government documents. There is no doubt that there is a priority. But in reality, in practical terms, food is still not in priority. So in the documents, yes, it is. But if we consider about the practical actions, allocation of budgets, allocation of efforts from the government, we still lag behind. For example, food is hardly reflected in political parties' manifesto. Food is hardly an agenda for election, for example. So it is not yet integrated into the political will. So these are some of the challenges that we still see to fulfill the constitutional commitment related to food.
Well, thank you for that. And I'll keep you there, Dr. Paljo, because from the progress that you have made in Nepal, which policies or approaches would you say have proven the most decisive in driving down hunger in the instances where you've seen progress there?
There are a lot of, it's a combination of policies and combinations of approaches, I would say, that have become instrumental in driving down hunger. The constitutional recognition, as I already explained, this is one of the major legal framework that had shifted the perspectives as well as the priorities. So that is very important. Meantime, the local level actions are more important than the national level actions in relation to food. So the local governments, when they are in place, local governments have devised different instruments to reach to the people. And these are very important. Local governments are made more responsible to implement food security related targeted interventions. We do have some very effective interventions in ground, especially the government is now implementing multi-stakeholder nutrition program. This is an integrated strategy that involves multiple government institutions at once. So this is no more a sectoral approach, but this is a multi-sectoral approach where government ministries, NGOs, community groups, they come together to address the malnutrition, and coordination is much improved. Coherence in policy is much improved through this strategy. So this is one of the core program that Nepal has related to nutrition. In addition, Nepal provides a number of other impactful programs with significant positive impacts, especially related to increasing awareness on food and then access to food. A few examples include Safer Motherhood Program, for example. And we have 1,000 Golden Days program, which are targeted to pregnant and lactating mothers and newborn babies. Similarly, we have school meal programs that are targeted to public schools, and these interventions have a meaningful impact that we can see at the local level. We have one program called Mother and Child Health workers program. This is a powerful approach where community health workers visit, first identify the pregnant women, identify the lactating women in the community, and then they make a visit, and they make these women aware of what to eat, how to prepare the good food out of local production. So this is very much a communal initiative. Which is introduced by federal government earlier, but now is adopted in local government. So these are a number of interventions which are very, very impactful. Meanwhile, what we have learned is increasing women's access to income has shown a positive impact on reducing hunger and improving food security. In many cases, we have seen that the women's first priority is to feed their families and children. Over the decade, what we have seen is women have improved access to employment, formal and informal employment, and they are more active compared to before in terms of cash, income generation. And when the income is reached to women's house, women's hand, then we can imagine and we can observe that they spend more on food. So remittance is also another important factor in case of Nepal that has also contributed to reducing hunger. So it's not only 1, 2, and 3, but there are number of combination of approaches, especially related to policies, related to institutions, and related to interventions.
Well, thank you so much for that, Dr. Paljo. McDonald Metzger, I'll come to you in Liberia because, as you were alluding to earlier, you've also put in place a multi-sectoral strategy where you're addressing both acute and chronic malnutrition. Give us a sense of what this strategy entails.
Thank you very much again, Christine. So Liberia's strategy recognizes that tackling malnutrition requires more than supplements or therapeutic food. It demands, like both Dr. Giza and Bimala said, a multi-sectorial, cross-sectorial, public-private, costed, community-anchored approach. The key features include, in Liberia, it includes costed multi-sectorial nutrition strategic plan from 2024, started last year, to 2028, covering health, agriculture, water, sanitation and hygiene, education, and social protection. Strong coordination mechanisms chaired by the Honorable Vice President of Liberia, Honorable Jeremiah Cone Sr., who is chair of the High-Level Steering Committee on Nutrition and Food Security. The Scaling Up Nutrition Network, SUN movement office in Liberia also sits within the Vice President's office. There's also the integration into the National Community Health Program, nutrition sensitive interventions across agriculture, WASH, social protection, monitoring, evaluation, and adaptive learning circles. In Liberia, currently with the implementation of the multi-sectorial plan starting last year, we are also currently in the process of, because again, you've heard everything from my fellow panelists already, with this donor fatigue, USAID funding drawdown. So we are looking inwards, talking about how do we mobilize funding internally to fund this costed plan? Where can we get money from? Where can the government get money from? And that's one thing. We are working with civil society organizations from all across the country, stakeholders from all across different government ministries, from people from the private sector, to see where can we fund this outside of little governments trying to find what else can we do to fund this costed plan. So that's what we're doing here in Liberia.
And just one more your way. The aspect of community engagement has come through very strongly in this conversation. But from your perspective there in Liberia, community engagement as well as talking to local leaders, what role has that played in overcoming food and nutrition insecurity and in making measures effective, but also scalable?
Mm-hmm. So community engagement is essential for legitimacy, contextual adaptation, sustainability, like one of my panelists said earlier, scaling and accountability. Local leaders across the country help adapt interventions into cultural realities. They maintain community assets, replicate success across different regions. So if something is going well in one part of the country, other parts of the country can try to replicate that. And it also helps to hold implementers accountable. So people are using different mediums, radio, music. In Liberia, we have a group called the Crusaders for Peace, who can tell different stories, different messages using drama, using music, drumming, going to different town hall meetings and engaging people from different parts of the country.
All right. Well, thank you for that. So I guess to our audience, you've really provided us, thank you to my panelists for that initial overview where we've essentially looked at the factors, the reasons why our progress is off track, and then some of those areas where we have seen the progress, what has contributed to that, and then the places where the gaps remain. And I think it's strongly come through from the speakers how we need to tackle those gaps and where we need to put the emphasis in terms of getting us back on track to our recommitment to zero hunger. But to all of you now, again, and perhaps you can just all put your microphones on, I mean, the panelists. I want to get your sense of, we talk about, this collaboration as a global community, right? So what is it that as I guess maybe let me just give us the scene setter here as we're saying that we're talking about this overlapping crises, accelerating crises, the challenges which include, we've highlighted the armed conflicts, the accelerating climate shocks, the economic fragility, which is exacerbating inequalities in our societies, making it more difficult for the poor, this political sort of disengagement. Why don't we just start with a look at how we address these overlapping crises as it pertains to our getting back to reaching and achieving zero hunger. Does anybody want to take a first shot at that? McDonald Mitska, I see you sort of leaning in there. You take the first one there. You were just the last one speaking. But I do want to hear from each of you.
Thank you very much, Christine. So I would say to start with, I would say approaches, for example, including risk layering across sectors, adaptive funding with crisis modifiers, local resilience and redundancy, conflict-sensitive programming, bridging the humanitarian development, peace nexus, and governance strengthening. For example, in Liberia, we've used a layered approach. For example, the climate forecast, people across the country using different seedings, social protection during lean seasons. I think these are all different approaches that could be really helpful in other parts of the world.
Dr. Pautel, perhaps I'll come to you with a more pointed one to say, who can support governments and how?
Who can support government? I think it's all related to political will, not only at the national level, but also among the international actors. Those who are engaged in conflict, those who are causing the climate shocks, those who are running the world economic order. I think there is a minimum agreement that's who are the vulnerable people, what could be the impact of these things, and how do we protect these people. So there needs to be a collective agreement and a negotiation to do at least these are the conditions that we all agree with. Okay, these are the non-doable things that we will not do. So these are some of the the international level we need to agree on some of the conditions, and then only the national government can can operate the way they want. So it's not only about the government of a country, but also the global actors at the larger scale. They need to agree on.
Yeah, and I guess, Dan Smith, to bring you in there on the perspective, or from the perspective of global actors and shoring up this political will among international actors.
Well, I mean, when you have conferences about development and conflict and peace and climate change and so on, it's almost incomplete if you don't have somebody, probably a minister or a deputy minister from one of the Nordic countries, probably agreeing with somebody of a similar position from one of the sub-Saharan African countries, who say, well, we have to get out of the silos. Right? So in the North, amongst many governments, despite the funding cuts, there's money. If they want to get out of the silos, the way to do it is to get the money out of the silos. Because the reason why organizations, governments, people go into the silos is because that's where they can get the resources to get something done. And then at the same time, that needs to be matched by a change in behavior and attitude, which I think is shared among a need that's shared amongst everybody, all institutions that are involved in this. We have to really understand that not just with this problem of food, but broadly across the gamut of issues that is concerning us as citizens of the world, there are not solutions to climate change, to conflict, to terrorism, to organized crime, to food insecurity and hunger, to the risk of the next pandemic. There are not solutions if there is not adequate cooperation. So we must find these ways of working together. And I think that this is something that can be maybe regarded not just as a kind of, institutional prescription, right? But as a personal value.
Yeah.
That we need to be working together in the faculties, right? In the government departments, between the government departments, between neighboring countries, between private sector and NGOs and so on. Just to be, unless we're working together, we're going to go down together. That's the truth of it. And if we could absorb that kind of get it into our skin, could wear it every day,
Right.
then I think that there would be some ways forward to be found there.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so I take it, Dr. Geza, that you would be underscoring the points made by Dan Smith there. I just want to take one more. Audience, I've noted some questions that I will be presenting to the panelists. So I do want to just get a little bit more out of you in terms of this dynamic that we have as an international communities, to the point Dan was making about, the global north. And I wondered, is there something that the global north could have done differently? Or could be doing differently, essentially, something that isn't putting more money into the system, because we are having to face the reality of what some would call donor fatigue. So what is it that the global north could have been doing differently? And perhaps what is it that the global south can be doing to strengthen and accelerate progress on hunger reduction? So if we could maybe go that way, we begin with the global north, and then we look at the global south, and then I'll come to some audience questions. So if you could keep these answers sort of precise and to the point. Perhaps, Dr. Geza, from you, the perspective of what it is the global north could be doing.
Thanks, Christine. I do echo a lot of what Dan mentioned, and particularly if you look at the partnerships between the global north and the global south, it's very, very important that within those partnerships, they're very equitable, they're very transparent, and they're honest. If the bulk of the challenges are with the global south, is the global north imposing solutions to the global south, or are you empowering and assisting the global south to be able to solve its own problem? We need to be very careful with the approach that we're using as well. That are we creating a reliance approach? Are we mainly just focusing on aid, rescue, and that sort of thing? Or should we actually start thinking about empowerment and building agency for the global south to be able to solve its problems? Because there are different solutions that are happening across different continents in the global south, where people are coming up with different innovations to solve their everyday problems. And most times those innovations just need funding and support to be able to be scaled out. There's a lot of communities, particularly if you're looking at Africa and Asia, where there's a lot of people that are coming up with solutions to solve everyday problems. Those solutions need to be scaled up. So I think for me, my biggest challenge is that I tend to see at a personal level that a lot of the relationship between the global north and the global south is a little bit lopsided, in that the global south comes with a lot of solutions that are attached to funding agreements and other financial resources. So obviously, if you want to access that money, you have to access it within a particular mandate. So I think there has to be more equity within the partnership, and there has to be more transparency, there has to be honesty, and we have to focus more on building agency in the global south. Thanks.
Thanks for that point, Dr. Geza. And perhaps McDonald Metzger, very quickly from you, what is it that the global south could be doing to strengthen the acceleration of progress as it pertains to zero hunger?
Well, I think here I want to go back to what Bimala said earlier about maybe galvanizing that political will across different countries, strengthening partnerships and relationships. But I would like to say going beyond political will is continuity. We have governments changing in many of our countries every 4 years, every 6 years. And then when those governments change, the national development agendas, especially when it comes to food security and nutrition, often changes. The priorities change. It's how can governments continue to maybe move forward or continue what a past government have started on agenda that they developed. So if another government comes, they don't just cut things down and everything dies, and the priorities are focusing on some other development area. So, and also I will add is learning from each other. So, for example, in Liberia, what we did when this government started, we went to Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is doing so well when it comes to nutrition that, I mean, in terms of what they have started.
Yeah.
They're above us when you look at the score, the GHHI the score. They are way above us. Well, not way, but they're above us. So we did a learning visit there to learn what they are doing well, so that we can bring that back to Liberia and try to put that back into our own context and what works for us here. So these are things that we can do. Have our lawmakers from Liberia go to Ghana, go to Nigeria, go to other parts of Africa and learn what governments they are doing, how that political will is being strengthened in other parts of Africa.
Yeah, fantastic points. Thank you so much, McDonald. I just want to come to the questions that have come through for the audience. And we are now racing against the clock. So Dan Smith, if you could tackle this very succinctly, so to say. So hunger is being used as a weapon and other countries are standing by. Do you think that this global inaction is hindering the fight against hunger? That one for you, Dan Smith.
Yes, I think it is. And I think that we are living in a time where there is some kind of blunting of our moral sensibilities. Maybe because the polycrisis is so full of so many challenges. You know, there was a Bob Dylan song that said every time you turn around, there's another hard luck story that you got to hear. And maybe this is kind of weighing down and blunting our sensibilities, and we're beginning to lose our moral compass. But when humanitarian aid is denied to people, when starvation is being used as a weapon of war in order to move them on, then whatever side you are on in your sort of loyalties in that conflict in some kind of way, this is wrong. I mean, there is straightforwardly no way to defend that on any moral basis in any moral system that I know about. So I think that moral blunting is reflected in perhaps in a weaker way compared to 20 years ago. I think there is less concern in publics in Europe and North America about meeting the development challenges of the world. I mean, if you look back to that time and you look back to those concerts and those rallies and so on, there was a huge amount of energy in the consensus there. And some of that needs to be rebuilt. And I don't think that what we're calling the global north, which is actually a range of different actors, different kinds of actors, I don't think the global north can take the lead in that. I think that there needs to be some humility on our side of the street, so to speak, to listen to more the voices which come through from the rest of the world, from the majority world.
Thank you so much for that. Professor Dr. Geza, this one to you. Has funding for food security research declined in recent years? And has the disconnect between research and policy limited the impacts of food and nutrition initiatives?
Thank you. It has remained quite stable from what I can see through my research, but the challenge now becomes that, as we had mentioned earlier, that a lot of the issues that we are tackling, they're very interconnected. So you'd find that funding is mainly concentrated in ensuring food security. But if we are looking at the nutrition security aspect of it, then we're seeing that a lot of countries, especially countries in the global south, we are starting to see a lot of rise in the obesity and also malnutrition. So I think the challenge with the funding, it's still there, it's stable, and the commitment is still there, but we're now starting to see other different types of issues then popping out. So now I think moving forward, then we'd have to look into how do we ensure that the funding is not only looking at the availability of food, but also looking at the type of food that's available and is it promoting food and nutrition security throughout and not only focusing on one element, because there could be food available, but we're also seeing the rise of highly processed foods that are available, and they're causing a lot of issues related to non-communicable diseases and that sort of thing. So the funding is there, but it's not tackling all the issues that are starting to become problematic in this generation.
Thanks for that, Dr. Geza. To you, McDonald Metzger, what can we do to upscale investment in local indigenous foods and infrastructure, such as roads, from production areas and infrastructure in territorial or mass markets? Bearing in mind, we're chasing the clock, so if your responses could now be tighter.
I would say it's really governments committing what I would call high impact investments, human capital investment, community health workforce, data and monitoring systems, rural infrastructure, shock responsive safety nets, behavior change communication, local governance strengthening, and nutrition sensitive agriculture. So investments in frontline delivery and data systems often have the highest return on investments. For example, in the US, I'm just giving that as an example where I live before moving back home to serve my people here. Frontline health workers and social service workers are considered the backbone of America's healthcare system. So bringing that back into what I would call what the global south here or in this part of the world, I think we can learn from some of those examples.
Dr. Pauljel, how can we help communities diversify their food choices? Sometimes it's difficult to introduce new types of food, as is being noted by the person who's asked the question.
It's a very good question. What I would say is in Nepal, there is a slowly increasing awareness about local food and increasing awareness among people about how to make the good food out of what is locally available that are more nutritious compared to the packaged food. So the increasing awareness is one of the important element of our work. When local government is empowered with capacity and resources, they would identify the potentials they have at the local level, and then they would invest more on raising awareness among the people about food, nutritional value, how to prepare the food in a good way so that the nutrition can be preserved. So there are so many elements related to food, but local government need to be in driving seat in those things. And then we also have community level initiatives where communities themselves run school related to food, for example. In cooperative they talk about local food, they talk about nutritious food. So I think when local government is in driving seat and when communities are in driving seat, it's easier for awareness raising as well as building capacities of people to access to good food. It's not necessary that you introduce a new food. It is important that you identify the locally available, locally grown food, their nutrition potential, and then help people to integrate them in their daily lives. So this is the approach that would be more useful. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. And we will leave our discussion here. I know that there were one or two questions that we didn't have the opportunity to get to, but I'm taking into account everybody on the platform's time today. We had asked you to be here for the hour and a half that we've allocated. So to be respectful to everybody's rest of the day's plans, I will bring our conversation here with my panelists to a close. Thank you very much for your input. But I think from our discussion here, one thing is coming through strongly, that hunger is political rather than inevitable as we are observing it, that achieving zero hunger requires partnerships based on equity. We need to empower the Global South, as we heard very clearly, to solve its problems with its own solutions, really. And that it's important for us to learn from each other, as that came through also strongly in our discussion. So a very big thank you to my panelists, Dr. Paljal from Nepal. Thank you for strongly sharing with us your progress there and the efforts to achieve zero hunger. As to you in Liberia, MacDonald Metzger, regards to, of course, the Vice President there. To Dr. Geza, as always, thank you, Dr. Wendy Geza, for your insight and sharing some of us the research you're doing and how it's translating into real life policy, as well as to you, Dan Smith. Much appreciated, and I can see much applause coming from the audience to you all. So thank you very much. I now essentially want to hand over now to get some closing remarks for our discussion, ladies and gentlemen. If you would be so kind as to bear with us, why don't we get some closing remarks now? And I'll introduce Rachel Nikalaha, who is the Director of Strategy, Advocacy and Learning at Concern Worldwide. Rachel, thank you so much, and we can see you. If your microphone is on, you can now take the floor.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks for joining us this afternoon, and to our panelists for such an excellent and interesting contribution. 20 years of the GHI have taught us that progress is neither easy nor linear. We have to learn from the challenges and the setbacks. If we go back 20 years to 2005, Google Maps, YouTube, and the Xbox were launched. And if we look now at the grip that social media and technology has on our lives, and yet we can't ensure that every person on the planet has enough nutritious food to eat on a daily basis. What we need to hold on to and build on is that the evidence is there. We know how to prevent and treat stunting, wasting, and undernourishment. We also know that it takes funding, political will, courage, and a vision that zero hunger is not only necessary for a peaceful, healthy planet, but it's achievable and it's affordable, and it's an investment in a healthy present and a stable future. The gains made between 2000 and 2016, when global hunger declined significantly, were not accidental, but through sustained investment and political will. In this year's GHI, Matthias referred to these at the beginning, we focused on 3 points, which are the call to action, the reminder that there's no place for complacency. The first, leave no one behind, act urgently on hunger and build resilient food systems. And so we, the collective we, everybody here on this call and much more broadly, need to secure political leadership for sustainable food system transformation, as MacDonald and Wendy emphasized in their inputs. We need to promote sustainable climate resilient agricultural development with communities as a long-term solution to food insecurity. And we need to ensure adequate, flexible and accountable financing from diversified resources. The second point, we need to strengthen national level political commitment and prioritize localized implementation, which needs to be supported by global solidarity, collective commitment, and the commitment which delivered the SDGs and which has dissipated since. We must promote high-level ownership and institutionalized responsibility, as referenced by Bimala, where enshrining the right to food in the Nepalese constitution. We need to establish inclusive accountability mechanisms and empower local governance. And Dan spoke about breaking the cycle of conflict and hunger. Conflict-induced hunger should be our great collective global shame, and it is not. Our moral compass has disappeared. As Dan referenced, there's no words for this type of brutality that allows people to starve. There are multiple examples where famine has been prevented in conflict contexts, and current examples where it is not being prevented. The level of power to switch the food supply off and as easily switch it back on again exists. Much more needs to be done to prevent and mitigate the impact of conflict on hunger. Uphold international law, which is a powerful instrument when it is used, and when it is not used nearly enough to hold perpetrators accountable for using hunger as a weapon of war. This is an example of the toxicity of geopolitics that Dan referenced, the scale and the brutality of conflict. In this year's GHI, there are a number of case studies where We as Concern and Welthungerhilfe are working on many of these actions with partners across the world, working across regions, counties, countries, with a wide range of stakeholders to do one thing: to support parents, to support their children, to feed them nutritious food and enough of it in a safe and stable environment where those children not only survive but thrive. This should be the reality for everyone. But for many millions of people, sadly, the simple right to food remains out of reach. We all have a role to play in changing that. And I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists, to our moderator, to the GHI team who worked tirelessly behind the scenes throughout the year, to the Conflict Institute, to Welthungerhilfe colleagues and Concern, and to everyone who joined us from around the world today. Thank you so much.
Rachel Nikelha, thank you very much for succinctly capturing the essence of our webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, please indulge me and stay a minute longer because a barcode is now going to appear on your screen. I want to hear one more time from you all. There is a barcode on your screen. If you can just maybe enter that. So what you do is you turn on your camera and you point it onto the barcode. A link should come up. Click on that and follow it. If that's not working for you, you can go into the chat and there is a link. This will be very quick. The question to you is, what is one step you will take today to advance zero hunger in your work or in your community? If I could just hear from you, it would just be a wonderful thing for us here. One step that you will take after today to advance zero hunger in your work or community. Again, there is a barcode at the bottom of your screen, or you can use the chat. Some is already coming up now. I see peace and political will. As we're saying, we're 5 years away from 2030. We know we're off track as it pertains to our commitment as a global community to achieve zero hunger. So with where we are now, as we seek to recommit to this sustainable development goal, what is it that you will do as an individual in your work and in your community, a step that you will take to advance zero hunger? And I'm seeing those responses coming through. Share with the team, absolutely, raising the awareness, advocating, very, very important. Yes, making sure that you volunteer, making that linkage to the private sector, promoting nexus thinking, creating awareness in our communities. I see this nutritional education, raising our voices, empowering our women, creating public restaurants. I look forward to a day where we can hear about some of these implementations and what they've translated to. Thank you very much for all of that. That is coming through. You do keep those coming because they will be captured in the recording of this webinar that we will, of course, make available at a later date through the YouTube page of Welthungerhilfe. Many thanks have been given, but I will do it one more time to thank all of you who have joined us and stayed the duration of this webinar as we have come together as a community, a global community really, because we're from all over the world, to recommit to SDG, to zero hunger. We leave no one behind. There is no place for complacency. I look forward to seeing you all again next time. From myself and the team here, a massive thank you. Good evening and goodbye wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please share the message. You can, of course, use the hashtag GHI2025 to further the message on social media. And of course, when that webinar is made available by recording, share that with others. But please take this report, share it with your community, but the solutions as well. Panelists, speakers, and everybody involved, thank you very much. And hopefully see you next time. Bye-bye.